All right, folks, welcome back. My name is David Miles, and we're going to be going through some more Miles of Truth. This time I'd like to talk about obstruction of justice and about peaceful protests and how those interact with one another. To start off, once again, this does not constitute legal advice. I am not an attorney. I'm not qualified to give legal advice. This is for educational purposes only. If you want actual good legal advice, I recommend you consult an actual attorney, which is not me. All right, that out of the way. Now, once again, I'm going to be talking about some different definitions, things, and we're talking on the legal definition side, which often differs from how you or society, even in general, might define things. So again, we're talking on the legal side because that we're talking about legal things and things with legal consequences. All right, so to start, we're going to talk about the family of laws that fall under obstruction of justice. Depending on if you're at the state or federal level or the specifics of what a person is doing, it could have many different names, and a lot of them are a little different, but they more or less end up being functionally kind of the same thing. So it could be interfering with law enforcement. It could be obstructing law enforcement. It could be called disobeying a lawful order of law enforcement. It could be obstruction of justice. All of these different things usually come down to the nuts and bolts of it is you're hindering law enforcement from doing their jobs. Okay? That's generally what these laws mean. Now, for the most part, and there is some more nitty-gritty to it, but for the most part, this means you are doing something to physically hinder law enforcement. Most of these statutes even have a section where it says speech alone does not constitute hindrance of law enforcement or obstructing law enforcement. They'll say something like that. But it can more or less be anything that makes it harder for them to do or impossible for them to do their job. But again, generally, with a carve out of speech alone does not count under that. And that's because we have the First Amendment, we have freedom of speech. And so you can't make laws that impact the freedom of speech within certain limitations and whatnot. So generally speaking, and I say generally speaking because there could be instances where your speech alone would still constitute the crime of obstruction of justice or one of its related crimes, such as someone is fleeing from the cops, they run past you in that direction, cops show up, where did he go? He went that way, and you knowingly lie to them to say that he went a different direction. Is that pure speech? Yes, but depending on the statute, depending on how it's worded, it might be considered still a violation, even though technically speaking it was speech only. But it gets into reading the actual full definition within the statute to see if that would be a violation or not. Many times, a lot of times it is. If you actually intentionally lie, that would be. Now, on the other hand, you're just walking along the street, bad guy runs that way, cops running up to you, and they say, hey, did you see this guy run anywhere? And you go, and you don't say anything. That's not going to be obstruction. Freedom of speech also includes the negative right, freedom not to speak. So, and there might be some legal argument in some state somewhere to where even that might be considered hindering law enforcement. I don't know, but for the most part, not saying things. So if you don't want to help the cops, don't lie to them. You might be in violation, but just don't say anything if that's what you're determined to do, okay? However, with all that said, generally speaking, speech alone is not. So you get these protests and these protesters that stay on the sidewalk and ICE is coming by and they're blowing whistles and they're hooping out like ICE is here, and they're yelling. As much as I might not like that behavior, as far as I'm concerned, that's still freedom of speech and would constitute peaceful protests. I don't agree with the behavior, but as much as I might not agree with that behavior, I am a very big believer in the Constitution. The Constitution protects speech. That's just speech, as far as I'm concerned. Okay. Now, on the contrary, we talked about what obstruction is not. What is obstruction? Generally, obstruction is some kind of physical act or refusal to act. So there are many situations in which an officer can give you what's called a lawful command, and it's go over there or get this far away from me. Many times, even if you're not actually involved, they give you that command because they've determined that your proximity, you're too close, and in so doing, you are interfering with their ability to do the job. They tell you to get away, and you physically don't. That many times would fall under these laws and would be considered obstruction. Okay? Now, this is not a judgment call. This isn't a value judgment. I'm not saying it should be or shouldn't be. I'm saying under the law, as these different laws are written, many times that would be considered obstruction. Is by you simply being in the way and refusing to get out of the way when ordered to do so. Okay, now as far as how far back they can make you get, where they can make you go, that's up to some interpretation. Some people might think that they can order you to go walk 100, you got to be 100 yards away. Most people would say 100 yards, that's excessive as long as you're on public property and you're at least 20 yards away or something like that. That's the most that they can tell you to get away. Now there's different court cases that have talked about these. To get a full defined answer, you're going to have to go to those. I don't recommend being the court case because it might be that the judge, that it comes down like, no, you weren't far enough when they told you to get away. You refused to go away far enough. You were obstructing. So don't be the court case that finds the exact amount. There have been court cases that have talked about exact amounts, but I'm not going to reference those. I'm not going to get that far into it. So that is obstruction when there's a physical act. Putting your hands on the officer, that's definitely going to be a physical act. Putting your hands on or moving the suspect or the product, the person that they're of interest that they're dealing with, that's going to be a physical act. Those are physical acts. Now, other things are also physical acts. Blocking a roadway is a physical act. Okay? It is. You're physically putting your body in a roadway, stopping vehicles from being on the track. Those are physical acts. If you're blocking a roadway so that, say, ice can't drive through, that's going to be an obstruction. If you're in the roadway and you're refusing to move, you are now probably committing a crime. Don't do that. Okay? When we talk about peaceful protest, what people view as peaceful and what the law views as peaceful is often a little different. Most people, when they hear peaceful, they simply interpret that as not violent. Okay? That is, legally speaking, a part of it. Usually, when you're talking in legal speak, a peaceful protest is one that is not violent and not otherwise violating the law. And that's important. So simply saying that what you're doing is peaceful protest does not give you First Amendment protections against violations of law. The fact that you decided to call it peaceful protest doesn't wash away illegal things you're doing. So, one example. You get a bunch of people that are just going to link arms and peacefully, not violently, sit down crossing the roadway. And that is their protest. They're calling it peaceful protest because they're not doing anything. They're just not moving and they're refusing to move. And they're just sitting on the street, linked arm in arm. That's not peaceful protest. Why? Because blocking a roadway is illegal. You can't do that according to the law. That is a crime. At very least, it's a violation. Most cases, it's probably an actual misdemeanor crime to intentionally impede a roadway. So therefore, that peacefully sitting there linking arm, not peaceful protest, not protected against by the First Amendment. You can be arrested because you're violating the law. Now, I've seen some videos where they're talking about People that are really angry at ICE and they want to try to impede ICE, well, you only got to use speech. Could be whistling, sure. Could be warning people, doing non-traditional sign language. You're allowed to flip the bird at them. You're allowed to warn people, tap the hat. That means cops are nearby. That's non-traditional sign language. The courts have generally found that is perfectly within your First Amendment rights. You cannot be prosecuted for that. That is generally what the courts have found. That those types of things, First Amendment, you can do them. Surrounding ICE agents so that they can't move. Surrounding the subject of their investigation so that they can't get to them. That's not peaceful protest. That's a physical act. That is a physical act that would constitute obstruction of justice or interfering with law enforcement or one of any of those names of things, depending on where you are and the exact specifics. That's going to be a crime. And they can arrest you for crimes. Saying that you're peacefully protesting does not give you a right to commit crimes. It doesn't wash away the crimes. So get that out of your head. That's not a thing. Doesn't work like that. Okay? If you are violating the law, you are not peacefully protesting. As much as you want to believe you're not. So don't do that. Okay? That's pretty much it for this one. A little shorter than the others. Thanks for listening.